Picture this. It's dawn on June 4th, 1942. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly in every direction, its surface deceptively calm in the pre-morning darkness. 240 miles northwest of Midway Atoll, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stands on the bridge of the aircraft carrier Akagi, studying intelligence reports with growing confidence. Behind him, the most powerful naval strike force in history cuts through the water. 4 aircraft carriers, the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, 272 of Japan's finest aircraft, pilots who have never known defeat across the Pacific. But 200 miles to his northeast, something unprecedented is happening in naval warfare, something that will shatter every assumption the Japanese Navy holds about American fighting capability. Admiral Raymond Spruance peers through his binoculars from the bridge of USS Enterprise, watching his flight crews prepare for what most of his pilots believe is a suicide mission. These aren't the weekend warriors Japan expects. These are men who've learned hard lessons in the Coral Sea, who've studied Japanese tactics with the cold precision of engineers solving a mechanical problem. What Nagumo doesn't know, what his intelligence reports can't tell him, is that American codebreakers have handed Spruance the most complete picture of enemy intentions in naval history. Every ship position, every attack timing, every strategic objective. The Japanese are sailing into a trap designed by men who understand that winning matters more than honor, that surprise trumps courage, that mathematical precision beats warrior spirit every single time. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey adjusts his flight goggles as he climbs into his SBD Dauntless dive bomber. Around him, 37 other dive bomber pilots are making final preparations for a mission that will either cripple the Japanese Navy or see them all die in the attempt. These men aren't thinking about glory or heroism. They're thinking about fuel calculations, wind drift, target identification under combat conditions. They're approaching warfare like a technical problem that requires technical solutions. What makes this morning extraordinary isn't just the scale of the forces involved. It's the fundamental difference in how each side approaches the coming battle. The Japanese Navy, drunk on 6 months of unbroken victory, expects another demonstration of superior Japanese fighting spirit. Admiral Nagumo has planned this attack like every other. Overwhelming force applied with samurai precision. Strike fast, strike hard, watch the Americans flee or surrender like they have everywhere else in the Pacific. But the Americans have learned something devastating in those early defeats. They've learned that Japanese pilots are mortal, that Japanese carriers can be sunk, that technological superiority means nothing without tactical intelligence, and that tactical intelligence is useless without the precision to exploit it. Most importantly, they've learned that the Japanese expect them to fight like gentlemen warriors when what the situation demands are cold-blooded killers. The irony is almost poetic. Admiral Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, designed this entire operation to force a decisive battle that would cripple American naval power permanently. He believed American morale was so shattered by 6 months of defeats that one more crushing victory would bring them to the negotiating table. What he couldn't foresee was that those defeats had taught American commanders something more valuable than victory. They had taught them how to think like their enemy while fighting like themselves. Spruance studies the plot board, showing Japanese positions with the methodical calm of a chess master who can see 8 moves ahead. His task force commanders, Admirals Fletcher and Browning, have spent weeks wargaming this exact scenario. They know where the Japanese will be before the Japanese know where they're going. They understand Nagumo's attack patterns better than Nagumo understands American defensive capabilities. Most critically, they've positioned their forces not where Japanese doctrine expects them, but where mathematical analysis of flight ranges and fuel consumption indicates they need to be for maximum tactical advantage. Lieutenant Richard Best, leading Bombing Squadron 6, runs through his attack sequence one final time. dive angle, airspeed, release altitude, recovery procedures. His squadron has practiced these maneuvers until they can execute them in their sleep, until technical precision has become muscle memory. What the Japanese see as mechanical, soulless warfare, the Americans have embraced as their greatest tactical advantage. They're not trying to outspirit the Japanese. They're trying to outthink them, outcalculate them, out-engineer them. The fundamental miscalculation driving Japanese strategy runs deeper than tactical intelligence. Admiral Nagumo believes he's facing the same demoralized American forces that scattered at Pearl Harbor, that abandoned Wake Island, that surrendered in the Philippines. His combat doctrine assumes American pilots will break under pressure, that American commanders will hesitate at crucial moments, that American fighting spirit will crumble when confronted with superior Japanese determination. What he cannot comprehend is that those early defeats forged American naval aviation into something entirely different. These pilots have seen their friends die because of tactical mistakes. They've watched Japanese Zeros outmaneuver American fighters because American doctrine emphasized individual heroics over coordinated tactics. They've learned that war isn't about courage. It's about making the other guy die for his country while you go home alive to yours. Commander John Thatch, leading Fighting Squadron 3, has developed entirely new fighter tactics based on mathematical analysis of Japanese Zero capabilities. His Thatch Weave formation doesn't try to outturn Japanese fighters. Instead, it uses geometric principles to create mutual support situations where American numerical superiority and heavier armament can negate Japanese maneuverability advantages. This isn't Bushido. This is engineering applied to aerial combat. But the real revolution in American naval thinking goes beyond tactics. It's psychological. Admiral Halsey's famous order before the Doolittle raid captured the new American mindset perfectly. Kill Japs, kill Japs, kill more Japs. This isn't about honor or glory or demonstrating national character. This is about systematic elimination of enemy forces using whatever methods prove most effective. The Americans have stopped trying to fight like gentlemen and started fighting like exterminators. As morning light begins filtering across the Pacific, both fleets are converging on coordinates that will determine the course of the war. Admiral Nagumo, supremely confident in Japanese superiority, has divided his attack force to strike both Midway Island and any American naval forces that might appear. His aircraft are armed with land attack bombs because his intelligence suggests no American carriers are in the area. His combat air patrol is positioned to defend against expected American land-based aircraft attacks. Every decision reflects Japanese assumptions about American capabilities and intentions. Assumptions that are about to prove catastrophically wrong. Because 200 miles away, Spruance's task force is launching the most precisely coordinated carrier strike in naval history. Not the largest, not the most powerful, but the most mathematically calculated to exploit every weakness in Japanese defensive positioning. The American pilots climbing into their aircraft this morning aren't heroes from propaganda posters. They're technicians of destruction who've reduced aerial combat to ballistics calculations and fuel consumption rates. They know exactly where the Japanese carriers will be, because American codebreakers have given them the enemy's complete operational plan. They know exactly when to strike, because intelligence analysis has identified the precise moment when Japanese aircraft will be rearming and refueling on their flight decks. Most importantly, they know something Admiral Nagumo cannot imagine. That American naval doctrine has evolved beyond recognition in 6 months of defeat. That the men he's about to face have learned to fight not like the Americans who lost at Pearl Harbor, but like an entirely different breed of warrior. Professionals who understand that precision matters more than courage, that coordination trumps individual heroics, that systematic destruction beats honorable combat every single time. The next 4 hours will prove that assumption correct in the most devastating way possible. At 6 a.m., the first American scout planes lift off from Enterprise and Hornet, their engines cutting through the dawn silence like mechanical prayers. These aren't glory-seeking fighter jocks. These are reconnaissance specialists who understand that information is the deadliest weapon in their arsenal. Their mission is brutally simple. Find the Japanese carriers before Japanese scouts find them. In aerial warfare, the side that strikes first usually strikes last. Lieutenant Commander Robert Dixon banks his SBD Dauntless into a climbing turn, his radio man scanning the horizon through high-powered binoculars. They're flying a search pattern calculated to intersect Japanese approach routes at the exact moment when enemy carriers should be launching their midway strike. This isn't guesswork. This is mathematical prediction based on decoded intelligence that tells them more about Japanese intentions than most Japanese officers know themselves. What these American pilots don't realize is that they're about to witness something unprecedented in naval warfare: the systematic destruction of a battle fleet by forces that shouldn't theoretically be able to touch them. Admiral Nagumo's carriers are protected by the finest fighter pilots in the world, defended by the most experienced anti-aircraft crews in any navy, surrounded by battleships and cruisers whose combined firepower could level a city. But none of that matters when your enemy knows exactly where you'll be and exactly when you'll be most vulnerable. At 6:15 a.m., Lieutenant William Brockman in the submarine USS Nautilus spots smoke on the horizon. Not just any smoke, the distinctive black exhaust of Japanese warships running at high speed. Through his periscope, he counts 4 aircraft carriers in perfect formation, their flight decks busy with aircraft operations. This is the target every American commander has been dreaming of since Pearl Harbor, the heart of Japanese naval aviation, concentrated in one killable formation. Brockman's contact report crackles through American radio networks with electrifying urgency. 4 carriers bearing 320 degrees, distance 180 miles, course southeast, speed 25 knots. Within minutes, every American pilot knows exactly where to find the enemy. More importantly, they know the Japanese haven't spotted American forces yet. The element of surprise remains intact. Meanwhile, Admiral Nagumo receives his own intelligence reports, and they paint a picture of complete American confusion. Midway's defenses are scattered and ineffective. No American carriers detected in the operational area. His strike force has achieved total surprise. In 2 hours, his aircraft will reduce Midway to smoking rubble, clearing the way for Japanese invasion forces. Victory seems mathematically certain. What Nagumo cannot see is the swarm of American aircraft now converging on his position from 3 different carrier task forces. 116 dive bombers, 67 torpedo bombers, 83 fighters. Not flying in the scattered individual attacks that Japanese doctrine expects, but in carefully coordinated waves designed to overwhelm defensive systems through sheer mathematical precision. Commander John Waldron leads Torpedo Squadron 8 off the deck of USS Hornet, his 15 TBD Devastators flying barely 50 feet above the ocean surface. These are obsolete aircraft, flying coffins that can barely keep pace with modern fighters. Their torpedoes are so unreliable that successful hits are more luck than skill. By any rational military analysis, this attack should fail catastrophically. But Waldron isn't thinking about rational military analysis. He's thinking about timing. His torpedo bombers are designed to force Japanese fighters down to sea level, where diving bombers can attack from high altitude without fighter interference. His squadron is expendable. Their deaths will create the tactical opening that allows American dive bombers to destroy their targets. This is warfare reduced to its most brutal mathematical equation. Acceptable losses in pursuit of mission objectives. Waldron and his men are about to die, so that other Americans can live and win. They know it, accept it, and fly toward their deaths with the methodical calm of accountants balancing ledgers. At 7:30 a.m., Japanese radar operators detect the first wave of American attackers. Commander Minoru Genda, Nagumo's air operations officer, watches the radar screen with growing alarm. These aren't the scattered, uncoordinated attacks they've encountered throughout the Pacific. This is a systematic assault involving aircraft from multiple carriers, all converging simultaneously on Japanese positions. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Japanese naval commanders are forced to react to American initiative instead of dictating the terms of engagement. Their carefully planned midway operation suddenly becomes a desperate struggle for survival. Aircraft that should be bombing American installations are instead rearming with anti-ship weapons. Flight decks that should be clear for combat operations are crowded with fuel lines and ordnance. The Americans have achieved something that Japanese military doctrine considered impossible. They've forced the most powerful naval strike force in history into a defensive posture at the moment of maximum vulnerability. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, leading Enterprise's dive bombers, spots the Japanese formation at exactly 10:22 a.m. 4 carriers in perfect diamond formation, their flight decks packed with aircraft being rearmed and refueled, fuel lines snaking across wooden decks, ordnance stacked beside parked aircraft, aviation gasoline fumes creating an atmosphere so volatile that a single spark could trigger catastrophic explosions. McCluskey keys his radio with surgical precision. This is Enterprise Air Group Leader. 4 enemy carriers sighted, commencing attack runs. His voice carries no emotion, no excitement, no hint of the historical moment unfolding. This is technical communication between professionals, executing a technical solution to a tactical problem. What happens next will be studied in military academies for generations, not as an example of heroic courage, but as a demonstration of what happens when systematic preparation meets perfect timing. The Japanese carriers, caught in the most vulnerable moment of carrier operations, face destruction delivered with mathematical precision by men who've reduced aerial warfare to an engineering problem. Commander Richard Best pushes his SBD Dauntless into a vertical dive toward the carrier Akagi, his bomb sight centered on the ship's forward elevator. At 2,400 feet altitude, traveling at 240 knots, he releases his 1,000-pound armor-piercing bomb and pulls out of his dive with G-forces that strain human endurance. Behind him, 36 other dive bombers execute identical attacks with factory-like precision. The Americans aren't fighting like warriors. They're operating like a machine designed for one purpose: converting Japanese aircraft carriers into burning wreckage as efficiently as possible. The mathematics of destruction proved devastatingly simple. At precisely 10:24 a.m., Commander Best's bomb penetrates Akagi's wooden flight deck and detonates in the hangar bay, igniting aviation fuel and stacked ordnance. The explosion doesn't just damage the ship. It transforms Japan's flagship carrier into a floating crematorium. Within seconds, secondary explosions rip through the hangar deck as aviation gasoline ignites aircraft, spare parts, and human beings with equal efficiency. Admiral Nagumo, standing on Akagi's bridge, watches in stunned horror as his perfect formation disintegrates. The Kaga erupts in flames as American bombs find her fuel storage compartments. Soryu lists heavily to starboard, her flight deck a twisted ruin of metal and burning aircraft. In 6 minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 fleet carriers have been reduced from instruments of conquest to floating funeral pyres. But here's what makes this moment historically unprecedented. The Americans aren't celebrating, they're calculating. Lieutenant Commander McCluskey, pulling out of his dive after destroying Akagi, immediately begins plotting attack runs on the surviving carrier Hiryu. His radio crackles with tactical updates, fuel consumption reports, ammunition expenditure data. This isn't emotional warfare. This is industrial killing applied with mechanical precision. Petty Officer Abe Zenji, trapped in Kaga's burning hangar deck, experiences the American transformation firsthand. Through smoke and flames, He watches American dive bombers execute their attacks with systematic ruthlessness. No wild aerobatics, no individual heroics, just methodical target acquisition and bomb delivery that treats Japanese carriers like factory equipment to be dismantled. His final diary entry, recovered weeks later, contains a single haunting observation. They fight like machines that feel nothing. The psychological impact on surviving Japanese personnel proves as devastating as the physical destruction. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, Pearl Harbor strike leader, lies wounded on Akagi's bridge as American bombs transform his ship into hell. Everything he believed about American fighting capability crumbles around him. These aren't the panic-stricken pilots who fled from Japanese fighters 6 months ago. These are systematic executioners who've reduced carrier warfare to mathematical precision. Captain Jisaku Okada, commanding officer of Kaga, makes his final radio transmission as flames consume his bridge. American attack methods completely unexpected. Our defensive doctrine inadequate. They coordinate like single organism. His words capture the fundamental shock rippling through Japanese naval command. American tactics have evolved beyond recognition, while Japanese strategy remains frozen in assumptions proven catastrophically wrong. Meanwhile, aboard USS Enterprise, Admiral Spruance receives damage reports with the methodical calm of a factory supervisor reviewing production statistics. 3 enemy carriers destroyed, 1 damaged. American losses minimal. Mission parameters exceeded. His staff officers expect celebration, but Spruance's response reflects the new American approach to warfare. Signal all task forces, prepare for follow-up strikes. The enemy still has 1 operational carrier. This mentality represents everything Japanese military philosophy cannot comprehend. Victory without honor, efficiency without emotion, systematic destruction without personal satisfaction. The Americans have weaponized their own industrial mindset, treating naval combat like assembly line production where the end product is enemy casualties. Lieutenant Commander John Thech, leading the fighter escort, watches Japanese Zero pilots attempt individual combat maneuvers against coordinated American formations. These Japanese aviators are magnificent fighters, their skills honed through years of combat experience. But they're fighting like individual samurai warriors against opponents who've learned to operate like interconnected machinery. American pilots don't try to out-dogfight Japanese Zeros. They use geometric formations and mutual support tactics that negate individual Japanese advantages through collective American strengths. The mathematical brutality becomes even more apparent as surviving Japanese aircraft attempt counterattacks. Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga, leading the strike from Hiryu against USS Yorktown, faces American defensive systems that operate with computer-like precision. Anti-aircraft fire coordinates through radar guidance systems. Fighter interceptions execute predetermined patterns designed to channel Japanese attackers into killing zones. Even successful Japanese attacks encounter American damage control procedures that seem impossibly efficient. Yeoman Donald Hine, manning a 20mm gun aboard Yorktown, experiences the American transformation from a different perspective. 6 months ago, he was a clerk from Nebraska who'd never seen combat. Now he's operating anti-aircraft weapons with the mechanical precision of factory worker, tracking Japanese dive bombers through calculated lead angles, adjusting for wind drift and target speed like solving mathematical equations. The farm boy who enlisted after Pearl Harbor has become a killing machine, calibrated for maximum efficiency. What terrifies surviving Japanese pilots isn't American courage, it's American coordination. Every defensive system operates in perfect synchronization. Radar operators feed targeting data to gun crews who adjust their fire based on mathematical calculations rather than visual estimation. Fighter pilots execute interception patterns computed for maximum effectiveness rather than individual heroics. The Americans have transformed naval warfare from personal combat into industrial process. Commander Tamon Yamaguchi, commanding Hiryu, recognizes the fundamental shift with crystalline clarity. His final message to Admiral Yamamoto cuts through military euphemism with devastating honesty. Enemy demonstrates unprecedented tactical coordination. Our combat doctrine requires immediate revision. American fighting capability exceeds all intelligence estimates. These aren't the words of a defeated commander making excuses. This is professional assessment from someone who understands that everything has changed. As afternoon shadows lengthen across the Pacific, the scope of American tactical evolution becomes undeniable. Japanese forces that dominated every Pacific engagement for 6 months have been systematically dismantled by opponents they barely recognize. The weekend warriors of Pearl Harbor have become precision instruments of destruction that operate with mechanical efficiency. Japanese military philosophy never imagined possible. Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie, leading Yorktown's dive bombers against Hiryu, embodies this transformation perfectly. His attack approach follows predetermined mathematical calculations for optimal bomb placement. His radio communications contain no emotion, no personal commentary, just technical data exchange that treats carrier destruction like engineering problem-solving. When his bomb penetrates Hiryu's flight deck and ignites her aviation fuel storage, Leslie's response is purely professional. Target neutralized, returning to base. The final Japanese carrier burns with the same systematic thoroughness that destroyed her sisters. Admiral Nagumo, evacuated from burning Akagi to the cruiser Nagara, stares at 4 columns of smoke, rising from what was once the most powerful naval strike force in history. His intelligence reports never mentioned this American capability. His tactical doctrine never prepared for this level of coordinated precision. Most disturbing of all, his warrior philosophy provides no framework for understanding enemies who fight like emotionless machines. In 4 hours and 22 minutes, American Task Force Precision destroyed 6 months of Japanese Pacific dominance forever. The mathematics were devastatingly simple. 4 Japanese carriers reduced to burning wreckage. 272 elite aircraft eliminated. Japan's most experienced pilots dead or scattered. All accomplished by men who'd learned to fight, not like heroes, but like engineers solving mechanical problems with systematic ruthlessness. The weekend warriors of Pearl Harbor had evolved into something Admiral Nagumo never imagined possible. Professional killers who understood that winning wars requires precision, not honor, coordination rather than courage, and mathematical efficiency instead of warrior spirit. Japan's belief in American weakness died in those flames, and with it, any hope of victory in the Pacific War.